It's extra drama for book number 42, Caught in the Middle.
So does that make me Miss America?
Previously on Sweet Valley Diaries.
Mother, she said in a forceful voice, let me tell you exactly what I mean. All my life, you and Daddy have tried to teach me that the most important values are honesty and respect for other people. Well, Manuel Lopez stands for those virtues more than any other boy I've ever met. He is loving, thoughtful, responsible, and more than all that, he's brave. For weeks he's wanted me to face you, to tell you that we've fallen in love. But I was the coward. Sandra hung her head for a second, then looked intently, first at her mother, then at her father. It's hard for me to admit, but I was ashamed of you two, she said softly. I was ashamed to admit that you could be prejudiced. It was the first time I had to face the fact that you two weren't always perfect.
You know, so I'm curious about your thoughts because I was writing down notes while reading this, and I was like, okay, so it ends with this redemption kind of restorative justice arc, but what made me hesitant and hesitate was how it was kind of couched in Manuel is so perfect. He is so perfect, right? He is like the model minority, and it ends with all along he's responsible, he takes care of his younger siblings. Time and again, he gives Sandy chance after chance and is so empathetic and deeply understanding because he understands it must be hard for her to buck against her parents because this is her first quote-unquote act of rebellion. And at the end, he does this tremendous act of selflessness when he saves her life. And so I was just, for me, I couldn't help but think like, you know, there's my 21st century, you know, racial justice lens that thinks, oh, like his humanity is recognized because he saved her life. And I have to wonder if he didn't save her life, would the Bacon family recognize his humanity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's appropriate that you ask that question in conjunction with this passage where Sandra says that he, more than any other person she's ever met, upholds these values that her parents had taught her about loving, thoughtful, responsible, that he's so virtuous. And it was actually at the same part of the book that thought crossed my mind. Like, oh, he's this... I mean, it's really well put right in, like, in the movie Queen and Slim, when the main characters are talking about Black excellence. I know Manuel is not Black, but I think that the argument still applies, this idea of having to be, not just be normal or just be okay, but like to have to achieve and overachieve to prove your worthiness of acceptance.
Yes. Yeah, I think that, you know, there is a sense that Manuel is like a paragon of a person and also quote unquote of a Mexican. And I think I have to say that made me a little unsettled. It just, even reading Sandy in the beginning when she was like describing him you know, thinking about him in her consciousness, and she thinks like he was the same age as her, also a junior, but he just acted older, and that was because of the different responsibilities he had, and he was very conscious of setting a good model and example for his younger siblings. And I was thinking about that idea of excellence for any minority, whether, you know, it's Black excellence, which is a very frequently discussed thing and very, very true, or brown excellence, like, you know, I'm Pakistani and Muslim, and I sometimes think about Muslims too, like, you know, you have to be a certain kind of way, and so I was just thinking about that in terms of humanity, and when Manuel is finally afforded the humanity that he's been asking Sandy to give him and to show him all along, and how that happens after his act of rescue and when he's put in the savior position. So I would love to talk to the author of this universe and just about, like, you know, that, but also I think it's interesting coming from a 21st century, you know, 2020 lens.
Right. I mean, well, that's the purview of the show. I think that these books are especially fascinating to look through with that perspective, because it tells us something about what we were presenting to young people at this time. I think it's a fascinating lens on society. And this book, in a lot of ways, you know, it made me happy that how I'm hesitating to say the word progressive, but it made me happy that it was a book that seemed to have the aim of making sure that people understood that prejudice was wrong and that, we should accept people. And so I want to give it that, especially in a few of these moments that happen. But to go back to the topic specifically of this kind of excellence requirement, I mean, one of the reasons maybe why it's a little bit discomforting is that sense of where were the other Mexican kids at the high school? And like, why was it Manuel who gets to sort of like rise to the level of being depicted in one of these books? Well, because he's exceptional, because he's really special. And did it ever occur to Sandy to like meet Manuel's other friends and see what they're like? Maybe it does, but that does not occur in this book. And no one, not a single person, expresses any question or interest in any other character in Manuel's life who he might be friends with. It just does. It's just not an area that the book covers. I'm making it sound like I'm taking the characters to task, but really it's just like the idea of the story structure. Like, wouldn't it have been interesting to know even another name? These books, Aisha, these books throw around names like they're pennies, just tossing them into a well. Like,
I'm sure I felt it. It's very deeply, it's teeming with characters and so populated, which is part of the thrill and pleasure, because you can tell when you're just reading a book, you're part of the whole multiverse.
Yes, it absolutely is a multiverse. It's such a multiverse, in fact, that there actually are a whole spin-off books that are about the history of Sweet Valley. These saga books called the Wakefields of Sweet Valley, the Fowlers of Sweet Valley. There is not, alas, like a Lopez's of Sweet Valley. Of course, we did learn that Manuel's parents were from Mexico, so they probably were not Lopez's of Sweet Valley. Unless Manuel's parents were coming to join some Sweet Valley Lopez's. But yeah, you're right. This, I thought that when Manuel had saved Sandy's life, that was when, even as a reader, I was like, okay, well, she can tell them now because he's done a magnificent thing. So they've got to accept that. And even that excellence still wasn't enough for Sandy at first.
Yeah, which is, you bring up a good point. And she had time and again, it was really only when Manuel was in front of her face and after she invalidated him, denied ever knowing him, that I think that the agony or whatever just...
It's so gross.
was brought to her. But you're right. She really, really... If there was a line, she pushed and pushed and pushed it and practically fell over the cliff herself and then was like, oh, wait, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aisha Bhoori, thank you so much for having this amazing conversation with me. I am so grateful for you.
Well, thank you, Marissa. I am grateful to be here and to dive into the Sweet Valley High universe with you.
You're a good diving partner. I appreciate it. It's like tandem diving, where the two people dive at the same time, and then they do a flip together and hopefully land in the water at the same time.
Always. Right there with you.
Awesome. All right. I think that's good enough. I think I'm going to stop recording now.
Amazing.